At this point, we've been able to write our detail pages as well as to create a home page that displays all of our posts, just like you see here. So let's go ahead and associate each of these posts to one author. So our author is going to be a user object, and this post will be written by that author or created by that author. In this example, we have only one author, which is our admin user, and that's who we've been able to use to create these. However, most of the posts that we have are not associated to a given user. So to do that, we're going to head over to our test.py. So I'm going to head over to our test.py right in here within our code. And we see that we've implemented various tests. So the first test that we wrote are basically model tests, and the ones that we wrote in the previous videos. We wrote tests for the home page. We also wrote tests for the detail page. Now let us go ahead and try to change some of the code that we have here so that it can be more readable as well as more concise. So the way we're going to do that is basically to use an external library called the model bakery. So the model bakery is a tool that can allow us to create fixtures that we can use for our testing. Now fixtures are just data that can help us to basically act as our test data or test objects that we can use within our code. So these fixtures can allow us to save time while basically creating our objects, creating relationships between those objects, and so on. So let's go ahead and first install model bakery, and then we go ahead and use model bakery to create these objects that we've been basically creating within our setup and within our setup methods. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to pull up our terminal, and I'll begin by installing model bakery. I also have the documentation right here. In case you need it, I'll leave it down in the description. So the first thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and install model bakery. So I'll do pip install model and then dash bakery. And once I do that, then this is going to go ahead and install model bakery within our virtual environment. And once this is done, then the next thing is going to be to actually create some or change some of the code that we have for now. So instead of creating this post and providing all the attributes, what we can actually do is to go ahead and use model bakery to help us do all this. And the beauty is it allows us to do it easily. So the first thing I'm going to do is to head over to the top of our code. So we are going to begin by importing the Docker module, and this gives us access to various methods that can allow us to basically go ahead and create our model instances, just like we're going to see. I'm going to come at the top here, and I'll say from model, it's going to be model bakery. We are going to import our baker. And once we have this baker function, actually module, we're going to go ahead and just come where we have, wherever we are creating a model object. So for example, we have a post object here where we are creating a post object. So let's go ahead and remove this. And all we need to do now is to just say baker dot, and in this case we call the make function. What this does is to just take in the model or the class for the database model we want to use. So in this case, it's going to be a post model. Now I want you to notice one thing that's going to happen here. If you pull up our terminal right now and run this test, so I'm going to say this is going to be python manage.py and then test. When we run our tests, notice what is going to happen. Our tests are all going to run and they are all going to pass. So that means that wherever we have a post creation, that post model has been created. So if we want to test whether this is actually a post model, let us try to write a test for it. So what I can do is to just come right here and say self.assert. So in this case, I'm just going to assert if that newly created post is an instance of our post model. So I'll do that with assert true. And the way I'll do that is by basically saying if this is an instance, so I'll just say is instance, and then I provide the object, which is our post. So I just come and say self.post, and then the next thing I'm going to provide is going to be our class, which is going to be our post class. And once I've done this, then I'm going to go ahead and save. When I save and try to run our post or our test again, so this is actually post model test. So is actually self. This is not actually self.post because we don't have it as an attribute of the class. However, we have it as post. Sorry for that. So when I save, hoping at this time it's going to pass. We now see that our post is passing. Basically, what this has allowed us to do is to create our post object without us having to define the amount of attributes. This is amazing. So let's go ahead and change all the places where we actually go ahead and create post objects. Now, when you do that, we're going to go ahead and change this. So instead of having this, I'm going to just come and say baker.make, and then I'll provide our post class right here. I'll do the same thing for the next. I'll just come and remove this post creation, and then I say baker.make, and then I'll just say post. And once we've done that, then I'll also come right where we have our setup method for the detail page, and then change this from this to actually baker.make, and in this case we shall also provide our post class. Now when I go ahead and do that, we now see that our code has been shortened and is now neater. So when I go ahead and pull up our terminal and run our tests again, we shall see that our tests are actually running. So Baker is what is helping us to do this without having to write all the attributes that our posts are going to have. Now that you've been able to fix that, let's go ahead and try to associate each of our posts to given users. So that means that you're going to establish a relationship between our user model that's given to us by Django. I'm not going to complicate things a lot by creating a custom user model. So I'll just keep it to the default given authentication model by Django. So what we're going to do is to write tests that will be able to test if there's a relationship between our users and our posts. So to do that, what I'm going to do is to pull down our terminal, and then I'll go ahead and create a class. So I'm just going to come right down here and create a class. So I'm just going to call this post. I'm just going to come and say post. I'll just call this the post author test, and this is going to basically inherit from test case. And once we've done that, then we're going to create a setup method. So this setup method is one that's going to allow us to create a user as well as to create a sample post. Now to do that, I'm just going to come and say self.user. Actually, this is going to be within our setup method. So I'll just come and say def setup. And once we have this, now in here is where we're going to go ahead and create our user. So I'll just come and say self.user. Now we shall need to import our user class, or basically create our user class. So to do that, I'm going to go on top of our code, and I'm going to say from Django.contrib.auth. In this case, you can either say .model, but I'm going to use the getUser model method or function. And after doing this, whatever the call to this function will return will be our user model. So I'll just come and say that our user model is going to be equal to get user model. And once we've done that, then the next thing is going to be for us to be able to create our user. So I'm going to scroll down where we actually have our user. So this is going to be equal to, so I can choose to use Baker. So I can just come and say Baker.make. And once we have this, we can go ahead and provide our model. So I'll provide our post model. And once we provide this post model, I'm going to go ahead and do my various assertions. So to test whether this is a user model, of course, we shall just come and say def test user is instance of user model. So I'll just say test if this user is actually an instance of the user model. Or what you can do is to actually say test if our author is an instance of a user model, then I'll say self. So after doing that, we can just do our assertions by saying self.assert. And in this case, what I can do is to assert if this is actually true, if this is an instance of user. So we can just provide our object, which is self.user, and then we also provide the class. In this case, our class is going to be our user class. So I'll just basically provide that user class. And once we have this, then let's go ahead and run our test. So when I pull up our terminal and run our test, so we now see that false is not true, meaning that there's something that's wrong. So basically, if we say self.user, this is not actually an instance because we've provided our model of post. So if we go ahead and make this a user instance, basically it's going to go ahead and try to give us to make our test run. So we now see that our test is running. So the new created object by bakery, by our model bakery, is a user model or a user model object. And now we see that it's an instance of our user model, which means that this is actually working. So let's go ahead and also create a sample post. Now to do that, we're going to come and say self.post, and this is going to be equal to baker.make. And in this case, what we can actually do is to go ahead and provide our post class. So we can just come and say post, and once you have that, then we're going to go ahead and save. And once you have that, then all we can do is to go ahead and maybe say that we're going to actually let's try creating this like the normal way we create our post without using Baker. So the way I'll do that is by basically removing this and then basically doing something like post dot objects dot create. And once we have this, then we can basically go in and provide our attributes. So we can provide our title, and this title is going to be equal to, let's say, test title. And then once we have that, then we can also provide our body. So we can say that the body of this post is going to be equal to, so in this case we can say this is going to be a test body, and then we can provide an author. Now I need you to remember that we don't have an author defined on our post model. If we go in our models.py, we actually don't have the author field. So basically our test has to fail so as to influence us into writing that author field on our model. So to do that, I'll just come and say, let's say we're going to provide that author field, and that is going to be equal to ourself.user. So what you're actually doing here is to establish a one-to-many relationship between our users and the various posts, meaning that a user can create very many posts. So once we've done this, I'm going to go ahead and save. And when we save, now let's go ahead and try to see if a user has, or if the relationship between a user is actually one-to-many relationship. That means if each of the posts that we shall create is associated to one user. So to do that, I'm just going to come and say def test, and then I'll say post belongs to user. So we're just basically testing the relationship, and the way we're going to do that is by coming and saying self dot. And in this case, we can maybe test for the first thing. We're going to test if the user or the post model has an author field. So the way we're going to do that is by saying assert, and then we can say assert true. And once we have that, then we can basically provide the has attribute. So the has attribute is what is going to allow us to find out if a class has a certain attribute. Now in this case, we're trying to provide a post object. So we're going to provide ourself.post, and we want to find out if this actually has an attribute of author. So remember, we haven't yet defined this in our class. So if you don't have it, it's of course going to give us an error. So once you have this, you can maybe provide the author field or the author attribute, and that's going to be a string. And we can also go ahead and let's actually first run it first. So when I go ahead and save, we can pull up our terminal, and when we run our tests, guess what is going to happen? We now see that our post class has no attribute of author, so we actually have to basically go ahead and define it. Now, defining a post author is going to be as easy as adding a foreign key attribute or a foreign key field to our model. So within our models.py, that's within our posts app, we're going to go ahead and define our post model. So to do that, I'm just going to come and say author and our author is going to be models dot foreign key. So this is going to be our models dot foreign key true. In this case, we're going to first import our user model. So I'll just do the same thing by saying from Django dot contrib dot auth. Such are going to be dot auth. We're going to import our get user model. And once we've done that, then our user model will be equal to a call to our get user model field. And once you have that, then let's go ahead and just say that this is going to be equal to our user. And once you've defined the model to which this is a foreign key, then you also have to specify on delete what happens when you delete a user. So we're going to say on delete is going to be equal to models dot cascade, because what you want to do is to basically go ahead and delete all posts that are associated to the user in case their user account is deleted. So I'm going to go ahead and save. And when I save, let's go ahead and try to migrate this to our database. So I'll pull up our terminal and say Python. Oh, sorry for that. So this is going to be Python money.py, and then this is going to be our make migrations. So we're being told to provide a non-nullable field. So we're now saying that it's impossible to add a non-nullable field author to post without specifying a default, because the database needs something to populate the existing rows. So we need to provide the one of default that will be set to no existing rows with a null value for this column, since we do not have any post being associated to any user. So we shall say 1. And once we do that, so we now see that we have this is going to be a value of Python. So we need to enter a default value of Python. So let us try to set a default value. So when you say 1, it's actually going to migrate, and it will basically add our field of author to our post, meaning that our database migration has been run. So now that we see that we've been able to add our author to our database class of post, let's go ahead and run our test to see that if it runs. So when you go ahead and run our test, sorry for this. So I'm going to go ahead and run my.py test, and this is actually going to pass because now we have an author associated to our post. So let's go ahead and also write some other tests. So to do that, we shall basically go ahead and say that in this case, what we want to do is to say self, and in this case, we want to assert if the author of the post is actually equal to our user. So we shall say self.assert equal, and in this case, we shall say self.post.author. We want to check if the user of the post is equivalent to our self.user. So when you do that, I'm going to go ahead and save. And when I save, we are actually going to go ahead and basically run this test. And now our test runs successfully. So this basically means that we've been able to associate our users to a specific post. So now that we have this, let's go ahead and try to associate the current post that we have to a given user. So when you head over to our admin section, so I'm going to head over to our admin right here, and this is actually right here. So when you refresh, so now we have all this. We also have our author. So our author is our admin. So when you try to save this, so I'm just going to save. And now we see that this has a post. So when you try to create a post, now we're going to be asked for the author of that post. So let's add another post. So let's say why you should learn programming in 2023. So let's provide some lorem ipsum text in here. So just going to go ahead and copy that from somewhere. So once we've done that, I'm going to just paste it in here and associate this to an author. Let's say the admin. So when you go ahead and save this, we're now going to see that our post has been created and we've been able to provide an author. So the next thing we're going to do is to implement some login and logout functionality so that you can be able to authenticate our users, so that users can be able to carry out specific actions when they are logged in, or basically when they are logged out.